Alright, good afternoon, history buffs and history lovers. Welcome to season 4 of History by Bike. And I will be telling you a story about an episode in World War II here in the Philippines, in which Philippine gold was transported uh, from the islands via a US submarine and then transported back to the continental United States. So stay tuned, and before we start, just please hit the subscribe button. Also, like and share. Give us your comments if you want to say something about this episode. And this will be History by Bike, and this will be our new episode. So our story will begin during the siege of Bataan and Corregidor. So this will be around in 1942. Actually, the situation was dire in Corregidor at that time, since the Imperial Japanese had started bombarding the island already. So at first, they were doing their bombing runs on a relatively low altitude, but then the anti-aircraft defense of Corridor would open up, and actually on the very first day of their bombing runs to the island, um, around 13 of the Japanese aircraft were shot down. So what they did is that they flew to a higher level, around from 24,000 feet up above to 30,000 feet. So doing a bombing run from such a height will definitely degrade the performance of a bomber. But the thing is, the Americans possessed um, an anti-aircraft shell that could work at such altitudes. But the problem at Corregidor at the time is that there was not that much anti-aircraft shells on hand when the Japanese would do their bombing runs. So only one battery in Corregidor could perform such a task. So what they did is that General Wainwright, who was the commanding officer in Corregidor, he requested that he be sent more of those fused shells from the US and transported to Corregidor. So this is where the submarine USS Trout comes in. She actually pulled into Pearl Harbor to take delivery of the aforementioned anti-aircraft shells that can hit bombers from very high altitudes. So this is where the journey of the USS Trout actually begins, um, from transporting those anti-aircraft shells from Pearl Harbor and then going to Corregidor. During the withdrawal to the Rock, vast amount of gold, silver, and securities were sent to Corregidor for safekeeping. This transfer was accomplished through the efforts of the High Commissioner of the Philippine Islands, Francis B. Seyre, and his assistants. The advance of the Japanese to Manila proper was inevitable. Provisions were taken to keep American and Philippine portable wealth out of the hands of the enemy. The wealth consisted of paper currency of both countries, silver pesos, of the Manila banks, gold bullion from city vaults and mining concerns, and valuable possessions of individuals on the mainland and of military personnel on Corregidor. Commissioner Seyre was given the authority to accept and sign for these valuables in order to guarantee their safekeeping and later restoration to the rightful owners. In the case of the loss or destruction of the valuables after this transaction, the owners would be reimbursed. Authority for the transfer emanated from the first War Powers Act passed by Congress in 1941. Seyre was notified of the power given him by the President through the War Powers Act on the 27th of December 1941 by radio. In particular, you are fully authorized by the President to take whatever steps you deem necessary to prevent such assets and reserves from falling into the hands of the enemy. This meant he was directed to take over for safekeeping and or destruction any reserves or assets in or with banks, brokers, safe deposit companies, insurance companies, or elsewhere, including any form of currency, coin, bullion, securities, drafts, checks, negotiable papers, etc. The job of collecting and transferring this wealth was accomplished under extremely difficult conditions. Small vessels carrying supplies and personnel to the Rock were pressed into service. The transfer of the valuables to the Commonwealth vaults in Corregidor had to be done under cover of darkness and complete blackout. Despite the difficulties encountered, it is believed that all assets received under authority of the First War Powers Act reached Corregidor safely. The amount of wealth accepted by Seyre was staggering. There were 18,000 treasury checks totaling $38 million, which had been received by the Philippine Treasury for payment and had not been sent to the United States for credit. In addition to these securities, there was on Corregidor a large amount of gold, silver, securities, and government documents in the vaults of Malinta Tunnel, which had as yet not been turned over to the Commissioner. A rough summation of the valuables collected under the First War Powers Act was nearly $3 million in American currency, $28 million in Philippine currency, and 10,800 pounds of gold. The paper currency was easily disposed of by burning. The serial numbers had been recorded after being recorded and radioed to the United States. Because the gold was the most indestructible, it was important to get it out of the Philippines. As the opportunity for this seemed unlikely, it appeared inevitable that the gold would soon have to be sunk in the bay and risk recovery by the Japanese. President Quezon and the High Commissioner were greatly concerned with the problem. If it could not be destroyed or safely sunk in the bay, there was but one answer remaining: evacuate the gold and silver by submarine. So, on the 3rd of February 1942, USS Trout finally approached Corregidor, and she was guided in because there was actually a naval minefield at the time at Manila Bay. So she had to be guided in by Lieutenant John Bulkley. He came aboard, and then he went back to his patrol boat, and then USS Trout followed the patrol boat through the minefields around Corregidor. So she docked at the south dock, and she proceeded to unload her cargo of anti-aircraft shells. At around midnight, the commander of the USS Trout, Commander Fenno, requested that he be given ballast in return for the projectiles that he delivered to Corregidor. So he requested actually rocks, crushed rocks, and sandbags to take in as ballast. But around midnight, there were some calls made, and then what happened was that the Philippine government officials in Corregidor, they were informed that USS Trout will take in the gold as their ballast. So they made arrangements, they made calls to transport the gold and other valuables such as silver coins to USS Trout. Dawn was but a few hours away. An all-hands effort of available military personnel, Commissioner Sayri staff, officers of the Philippine Commonwealth, and even Philippine stevedores was required to load the 40-pound gold bars from the truck and hand them singly down the hatches of what might be termed a modern Spanish galleon. 319 gold bars were taken aboard, weighing approximately 6.5 tons. The remaining ballast was received in the form of 630 bags of coins, each containing 1,000 silver pesos. By 0250 hours, the treasure was aboard. At 0300 hours, Trout again got underway. 3 miles off Corregidor, she dove in a predetermined spot. There, in 140 feet of water, she lay seeking protection from the enemy. Submerged, she waited until nightfall for one final load of securities. After working for 2 nights and a day, Trout's crew was given a day's rest. There was to be a rendezvous that evening with a small patrol craft which would deliver the remaining securities and some additional diplomatic mail. That evening, the final transfer was made, and 15 minutes after surfacing, Trout was on her way to the East China Sea with probably the richest ballast ever carried in a warship. The gold and silver would be worth nearly $10 million worth. As commanding officer of Trout, Commander Fenno had assumed responsibility for the treasure of gold and silver. The manner in which the loading was conducted was such that he could not personally check exactly what was brought aboard during those dark hours. Therefore, he put a note on the bottom of the receipt he signed. Received without verification of numbers of bars or contents of the container and the articles described above. In a letter from the President of the Philippines, Manuel Quezon, Fenno's instructions were that he was to transfer the gold, silver, and papers of the Philippine Commonwealth to the Secretary of the Treasury in Washington, D.C., or to a safe place to be in custody pending receipt of instruction from the Secretary of the United States as to their disposal. Commander Fenno now had a valuable cargo to carry home to Pearl as he had brought to Corregidor. Even in time of global war, negotiable securities and precious metals have high value, but the monetary value had no disturbing effect on the performance of Trout's officers and crew. The presence of treasure did not change his orders to carry out his war patrol, and accordingly, he set course for the East China Sea. So, the submarine USS Trout departed Corregidor after taking in her last cargo of securities, diplomatic mail. Commander Fenno even asked if there would be a passenger coming on board so that he could take them in, but the reply from the people from Corregidor is that there will be no passengers going aboard the submarine. So finally they departed Corregidor. Um, it was slow going, going back to the East China Sea. The weather wasn't that good, and actually, USS Trout still performed her war patrol and actually engaged a Japanese cargo ship at the East China Sea, and she managed to sink her during that return trip coming in from Corregidor going back to Pearl Harbor. So it was several days when she finally managed to get out of the area. Actually, there was still one final time when she tried to engage uh, enemy ships around that area in the Bonin Islands. But well, her quarry was actually able to get away. She fired around 3 torpedoes, and that was the last time that they saw uh, the Japanese, and then she headed off to Pearl Harbor. No more contacts with the enemy were made en route to Pearl Harbor. 2 days out of Pearl Harbor, Trout rendezvoused with USS Litchfield. On the afternoon of the 3rd of March, Trout moored portside to USS Detroit at the Fleet Air Base in Pearl Harbor. The cargo of gold, silver, and securities was turned over to Detroit and subsequently to Treasury officials. At last, everything seemed to be accounted for. However, a few days later, a single 40-pound gold bar was found in one of the forward compartments of Trout. For several days, Commander Fenno had 40 pounds of gold, for which no one was willing to take the responsibility. Later, a treasury official receipted for it, and the last remnant of Trout's gold ballast was finally in official custody. So this will be the end of our episode for History by Bike. So I hope you liked our topic for today, which is the USS Trout and her transport of Philippine gold from Corregidor to the United States. So please don't forget again to click the subscribe button and also like and share the episode. So this will be History by Bike, and I will be signing off for now. And see you on our next episode.